Yeah.
Oh shit. Sorry.
Huh?
Nothing.
You alright?
My back is dead.
He's a pirate.
Sorry. Ow.
No.
I woke up from sleep at 7.
Oh, damn. I slept in by like 10 minutes and missed the office hours with my teacher. I scheduled by 10 minutes. Yeah, that was kind of embarrassing.
Wait, John, I have a question. So for your title, why does enterprise developer hate?
There's a joke that like enterprise developer as a term is kind of stupid. There's just a joke that like all it means to be enterprise is that you way overcomplicate things and spend too much time on problems. Like there's
It's just a spam email /
Yeah.
internet.
like there's enterprise fizzbuzz.
Yeah.
Where someone solved fizzbuzz in an obscenely overcomplicated way.
Also, they don't use those tricks. They rather use like waste many hours.
No, they use too many tricks.
Yeah,
Oh, they use too many tricks?
Yeah.
too many tricks in a way that's like not productive.
Hmm.
The point is productivity.
Doctors hate them. Power companies hate this.
Eat apples. Doctors hate this.
But the Unity 3.32 just have so many problems with the animation stuff. Even though yesterday you helped me with that transition, I still couldn't add motion to any state.
Sorry. Ugh. That's really annoying. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that bug. It's so stupid. It's like, why?
Wait, are you able to add motion to animation?
Motion such as?
Like add motion to each animation state.
Like apply an animation to an animation state?
Yeah, are you able to do that with the 3.32?
I haven't tried.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm doing that right now. I couldn't do it with your trick, like click 3 of them and then.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a hack. I don't know why it worked. I just found that like dragging kind of lets me create an arrow. It's scuffed. I might report it to Unity as a bug if I can figure out what causes it.
This is what we're seeing right now. It's only your thing.
Okay. It's not ideal.
Just in OBS, just change it to both the cam and you, or both the cam and the thing.
Yeah. So Zoom won't let me use just the camera.
So in OBS as well,
virtual
in one of the sources, add window capture or display capture.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's what the stream is seeing.
Yeah.
That is editing the current camera. Just put another one under it. Or that works too, I guess.
There. It's functional. That's gonna block so much stuff. Also, it's so tiny.
LMAO.
Well. I guess that kind of works.
Yeah, it's fine. It looks okay here.
Yeah. Spoilers.
Spoilers.
All right, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So, hello people on Zoom. Hi, and hello everyone here. This is just gonna be a few things that I use a lot in Unity that are just like kind of broken for how powerful they are. So here we go. Specifically, there's these three features. There's scriptable objects, there's animation curves, and there's attributes. Each of these is like really powerful in really subtle ways, and when you like add them to your toolbox, you can get creative with them. So I'm going to start with scriptable objects. Scriptable objects are basically like monobehaviors, like scripts that you drag and drop onto game objects, but they are not attached to game objects. Both scriptable objects and monobehaviors inherit from the same script base. They differ in really subtle ways, but the general idea is that they are very similar. You probably, usually you put data in scriptable objects, but you can put methods in it. Basically anything you put in a monobehavior, you can put in a scriptable object. They're also really nicely serializable. You can create instances of them as files and save them. And that lets you do really funky things with them. So what would you want to use these for? They're really useful as like modular data. They're a great way to save and store like levels, dialogue, or item data for inventories or something like that. You can just right click in the assets folder, create a new scriptable object instance, and save it. And that works. In some cases, that's much nicer to use than like prefabs or prefab variants. They're just good ways to store data. And scriptable objects also, like you don't have to create them as files. You can create them as instances in the scene. But what that means is that they're the same thing. So you can save and load pretty much anything. As long as you set up your objects to be serializable, which is its own topic, you can essentially structure your code in a way where you can save and load the entire game state. And that's really funky. It also using this encourages better code architecture, helps you structure things better. Because it most of the time you want to use scriptable objects for storing data. So it allows you to separate your logic and your data, with monobehaviors doing logic, scriptable objects doing data, or something else doing logic, whatever. And that kind of separation idea, having data on over here and logic over here, lends really nicely into what's called entity component system design, where you fully separate data and behavior, and you store, this is a list of, say, all of the enemy positions and all of their health. And then you have logic over here that edits that big list of data, and you can separate them. And that just helps with performance stuff. It's a bit of a complicated topic to learn about if you're just trying to dive into it. But scriptable objects are a nice middle ground where they give you some of that code architecture without diving way into ECS design. And probably the coolest thing about scriptable objects is that they let you make really modular code. So you can, let's say you had a scriptable object that is player position. You can access, or no, let's go with player health. And you had a UI health bar, and you wanted those to interact. The way you would do it with monobehaviors is you get a reference to player health script, and then you just reference that directly. But what happens if you destroy the player? You just destroy the object. Suddenly that's not a thing anymore. The health isn't on the object anymore because the object is gone. So you get a null reference. And normally you can just account for that, like null reference checks, whatever. But that can get really, really annoying when you're doing multi-threading, or when you start scaling up your code, you always have to rely on you remembering to make a null check. What this can let you do is say, put the data in the middle, this is the player health object that depends on the health, and then have this UI component that references that player health. And you can then just destroy the player object and have player health be its own thing over here, and you never get null based on that. Now, ideally, you'd also want to destroy a player health UI when you destroy the player. That's why this isn't like the best example, but you get the idea where you never have to worry about structuring spaghetti code. Everything, like the UI script only needs to worry about the player health data, and the player health script can do its own thing. So that's really fun stuff you can do. If you want to hear more about how scriptable objects are powerful, there's this really great GDC talk. It goes into game architecture stuff, how to use them, and then that one's good for like inspiration and just generally how to use them. There's this other GDC talk. It is very much more in depth. It's pretty technical. It goes into some engine design, like why Unity is designed the way it is, but it's totally worth watching. Super interesting. And then going back to what I was talking about with scriptable objects. Huh?
Waiting room.
Why is there a waiting room? Stop. Why is there a waiting room?
No, just go above and hover over the thing.
Where is it?
Security.
Security. Disable waiting room.
Yeah. No, people should be able to come in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody's in. All right. Oops. Okay. Anyway. So going back to what I was saying about scriptable objects being like savable data, there's lots you can go into how what data can be saved easily and what's not so easily. That's called serialization. You can read a couple articles about that. There's a couple links. Here's a link that just goes over serialization, and here's the actual unit docs. Anyway, and that is scriptable objects. Very cool. Next up, animation curves. Animation curves are not just for animation, despite their name. They are a very simple function. You get float in, you get float out. It's just basic math. But what gets fun about it is you get this neat little curve editor in the inspector, which means you can make any curve that does any function that you please visually. And you can see this little demonstration of like what that looks like. So you can do a lot of things with that little simple math stuff. You want to do animation, they are amazing for it. You can do like damping, you can ease in, ease out, you can do exponential motion. It's built in. You don't have to worry about any of the math, you just plug and play. And this actually pairs really well with procedural animation. You can do all sorts of funky stuff with that. I did like a cubic function in the procedural animation talk I did, but you could replace that with like a curve editor of your own and make the legs move in weird ways. That'd be kind of neat. You can do a lot more than animation with it though. You wanted to make a day-night cycle, you can do that. You can like have a big curve that goes like a bell curve shape almost with like the brightness of the sun based on the time of day. You want to give some funky input to a shader, you can do that. You want to control how XP gains scale based on the player's level and grow over time. Yeah, that's a totally valid use for it. And the best part about all of that is that it lets you very easily tune the values. You don't have to go into the code and write stuff yourself. You can just put a curve in the editor and play around with it. And you get like instant visual feedback. And that is huge for working with designers. If you want to give a designer a swing animation attack to tune, they don't want to mess with the code. They just want to see a curve. So it's very useful. Also, check out gradients. They're basically the same thing, except you get a float in and you spit out a color. You can see those in like the trail renderers and the particle systems. And yeah, you could use it for like an even more advanced day-night cycle. I did this one in my games where I did like an animation curve to control the brightness of the sun and a gradient to control the color of the ambient light. And that worked really well. So here's like a little video showing how animation curves are even more powerful. There's even more examples in that video of stuff you can do. Like I think he's controlling how fast a platformer controller accelerates. He controlled it using an animation curve. And here is this neat website that gives you a bunch of different curves and their names that are pretty cool. Now, this website is especially useful because it shows you the math behind it, but you don't need to worry about any of that because you're not writing the math. You're just getting a curve. So you can copy and paste these kind of, and that's fun. So that is curves. The last thing, attributes. These are almost like tags, but for scripts. You can put them above or in front of a line of code, and you can use more than one. A lot better than Unity tags. And that lets you label, like, this line of code is this kind of thing. And that lets you do a lot of things. There is a huge list of different built-in attributes that are all available to you. Here's the whole list. And here's the documentation, like a nicely formatted documentation showing what they all do. But going over every single one is not very useful. So here's a few that I use pretty regularly. If you put a range attribute in front of a float, it clamps it between min and max values and gives you a nice slider in the inspector to go from that minimum to that maximum. So you can create a slider in the inspector. Serialized field makes a private variable show up in the inspector. You can actually, this is one that you should be abusing all of the time because it makes like a variable useful in the inspector without letting other scripts reference that. And if you're working with another program or another programmer on your like a team or something, that's huge because you want your script to encourage another programmer to use it as you want it to. Like this function is what you're supposed to use, not directly accessing this variable. You want to do that, but you also want debug info. That's how you do it. This only works on serializable variables or classes or structs or what have you. So again, go look into what serializable means. It's very cool. Then those two, menu item and context item, allow you to put method or function calls in drop-down menus. So you can like go up to the top where it says like file, edit, window. You can add your own drop-down menu and put a function that you define in there. And it can do whatever you want. And it's very cool. Also, tooltip, header, and space let you just kind of organize stuff in the inspector and make it look pretty. And serializable and create asset menu. Kind of do what they say on the tin. Serializable makes something serializable if it's correctly supported. And create asset menu adds a script to the create asset menu. Probably one of the most fun things about attributes is that you can write your own. So you're not limited to whatever is available in Unity. You can do your own things. And here is a nice forum post about that. I actually did this in a project that I'm currently working on where I have a vector 2. The way shaders work, only vector 4s, or like 4D vectors, are displayable in the inspector. There's no vector 2. So I made a custom inspector attribute to display a vector 4 as a vector 2. And I just copied that up from somebody else's code, but it lets me have a two-dimensional vector in the shaders. So attributes are handy. Unity docs exist. They'll help you a lot. And attributes are fun. So with that, happy programming. Those are 3 neat tricks. I will post these slides. I would recommend just referring to them when you remember that these features are there. But in general, these features are very useful. I use them a lot. So yeah, that's the workshop.
Well, serialized just with random patterns, as always mentioned, serialized one, but I don't know what serialized is.
Serializing. Ryan, do you want to explain? your problem?
Serializing is taking anything and turning it into some form of text, and then that way you can. It's like a series of characters or information, I guess.
Wait, so in
So-
Python it's a list? Oh, it's a string serializable.
Well, yeah, because it just is a string.
Okay, it's converting byte data to UTF-8.
So what is non-serializable?
Well, it just any so you can see as long as it's like some sort of linear thing, right? It goes from left to right. So you can have a binary serializer, like just a long line of ones and zeros that kind of represents your object. That's a thing.
Got
Usually
it.
people like to use like JSON or whatever the fuck they use.
So it's continuous. It's
Yeah,
it's determined and it's all
Yeah.
cohesive.
yeah.
Okay. So like lists wouldn't be that.
No, lists are fine because
Okay.
they're also already in a giant row, right? You just take every element inside each list, turn it into you serialize that, and you serialize the whole ass list. I guess. The problem is when you have things that contain themselves, or if you have things that contain other things.
Yeah,
that contain
anything
themselves.
recursive or anything that can change based on context.
Yeah, I guess you can serialize a tree if you don't like hold the link to your parents, but like if you have like something that knows about if you have A know about B and B know about A, then there is no way you can serialize either of them.
Got it.
Wait, so dictionary is not serialized.
Dictionary is serializable. You just have a giant. You just take every pair of key and value. You serialize both of them. You store that, and then you make a giant list of it. And then, so if you're able to turn your thing into a string and then back into the original thing, then you can serialize. Then it's serializable.
Ooh, chat has a question. Seems
Thank you.
Oh, never mind. I have a question.
Yeah.
Cool.
How do I store? Let's say I don't want to write a string parser. How do I store like dialogue?
So what you could do is make like. Okay, so would it be branching dialogue or non-branching?
Non-branching, so like,
Okay.
and it will be like distinct waves, quote unquote. So each there will be like a distinctive dialogue section that reads off of some sort. Right now, I have a very
Got it. So it like
awful
reads
solu-
a chunk of dialogue. and
Yeah,
then it
I have an
stops.
awful solution of nested list of lists.
Okay, a really easy way to do that is create like a scriptable object that just has a list of strings.
Yeah.
And then every chunk of dialogue, save one of those as a scriptable object. And then you can load those scriptable objects using resources.load. You can just have a list of those. And
Yeah.
it makes it easy to edit.
So a list of scriptable objects, and each scriptable object has essentially a list of text line. Right?
I guess so. So like the scriptable object is just a way to group any like sort of data together, right?
Okay.
So let's say you have some visual novel, right? You have the character who's talking, either on the left or right side. This is what they say, and then that is one object.
A really great way to use scriptable objects is, so project I'm working on, Spaceologist, how we spawn enemies is we have one generic enemy prefab that is just like an enemy that can be any enemy.
Yeah.
And then we have a scriptable object for each type of enemy. And that has data about the enemy, like this is the image that it should show. This is what behavior it can have. This is how much like food it needs, what tiles it can stand on, all that jazz. And then when you spawn an object, it creates the prefab and then it shoves all that data into scripts based on what kind of enemy you wanted to spawn. And that lets us like resources.load types of enemies. So you can really easily like figure out what, like store what kind of enemy goes where.
That sounds great.
Generally, it's just a way to segment data. So you don't have lists of lists. You just have one compartmentalized thing. Like this is a dialogue entry, and this has a bunch of lines of text. There's nothing technically, physically wrong with lists of lists.
But it's really
It's just
awful.
annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's annoying.
So this just makes things easier. And I guess it also makes it a lot easier to like reorder the list.
Yeah.
Like you want this dialogue chunk to come before that. You can just switch them around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just more flexible.
Cool.
All right. Fucking hell! I didn't record.
You recorded by streaming to YouTube and Twitch.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, in that case, get out of here.
Whoa.
Whoa!
Recurve.
Infinite
That
mirror
is
dimension.
funky because it has like a time delay to it.
Wait, what's the recursion limit there? I wonder.
I'm
There is no
curious.
limit. It just takes a screenshot
Well, yeah, it
of
goes
your
on
screen.
infinity, but at one point, just one pixel like
Oh, okay.
get replaced.
So it's a physical.
It's a
limit.
physical limit, yeah.
Yeah. Like, what is the physical limit?
Also, you can see you get more purple because of compression.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, I'm getting dizzy.
Okay, really.
Whoa.
And call.
And
And you draw. That's
And
fun.
OBS recording.
All right, get out of here.